Hi everyone, welcome back. Today we're doing an expansion, a part 2 of the No More Stinky Chicken Run, Composting Chicken Run System video. It's a mouthful. Let's look at how we can level up your composting chicken run. Let's talk about why a composting chicken run is so important to me that I'm making 2 videos about it. Well, my composting chicken run system is the foundation of the entire system that I am trying to build here in my backyard. I'm trying to make a micro version of a regenerative agriculture farm right here in my little space here. The reason the chicken run is so important to that system is because I am using chickens as my livestock in that sort of a regenerative agriculture system. Now, I don't have room for cows or sheep here. That would be pushing it, and I don't think the neighbors would be very happy, but I can have chickens. And the reason you need livestock moving across your land in a system like this is because it is all about cycling nutrients. So I am using the chickens to capture and cycle nutrients in my environment so that they don't flush away to other places, and I'm getting the absolute best fertility I can get from my land, and that fertility is increasing year after year after year. Now, chickens are not cows. Their digestive system, their diet, everything is different. So you can't just use a chicken to do the role of a cow, and that's where my composting run comes in. I use the chickens and the chicken poop to create a system that more closely matches what a cow is doing in the landscape by munching up the grass and digesting it and pooping it out the back. Now, my chickens do like to eat grass, and they do a lot of pooping out the back, but chicken poop is not like cow poop. So I need to concentrate their poop as much as possible in one area and allow it to go through a process that can then go out onto the land and create that little closed loop system. And the other reason why a composting chicken run is so important for me is because I am in too small of an area to have a completely closed loop system. I'm always going to have to bring some inputs, and in this case it's the chicken feed, into my system. I just don't have enough space to be able to grow all my own chicken feed and do all of the things. So to maximize those inputs I do need to bring into the property, I am using the run to capture every last drop of nutrients that comes in the chicken feed bag into the chickens, and whatever they're not using for themselves goes out the other end, and I can capture it in my run and use it for my growing plants. Now that you understand why a composting chicken run is so important to me, let's talk about how I make my composting run as successful as possible. There are some main components to a composting run that you really have to get in order for it to actually work as intended. So for this video, I'm focusing more on getting really good quality compost out of your run. These things that I'm talking about can be applied less strictly if all you're targeting is a chicken run that doesn't have mud and doesn't have smell. The first and major component of getting your chicken compost run up and running is lots and lots and lots of carbon materials. So that are your brown materials, if you're familiar with composting in other situations. And in my chicken run, it's predominantly wood chip, and I would recommend that to you as well. The reason for wood chip is because it is just almost 100% carbon. And we need that nice, loose, deep, thick carbon layer in there because chicken poop is a lot of nitrogen. And the carbon and the nitrogen work together to break down into the compost. If you have not enough carbon, you are going to run into your stinking problems because there's not enough places for the poop to go and start its process. And you're not going to be able to harvest out the volume of compost that, well, I for one want to harvest out of this system. So I would highly recommend starting your run off for success by putting in a deep, thick layer of wood chip or similar material. Also, you can use things like fallen autumn leaves, but it doesn't quite get the system cranking as well as a foundation of wood chip does. And that feeds into the next important thing, which is that the bedding that you're putting down, the covering you're putting down to start your compost system off needs to be scratchable by the chickens. And wood chip is extremely scratchable by chickens. If you end up with a surface that the chickens find hard to scratch, if it mats together like grass clippings can do sometimes, they will find it hard to turn it, move it, and mix all of that together, which is really important because they're doing the work for you. So you don't have to do very much work to make your compost. They're aerating it, they're moving the materials around, and they're moving the layers around so it all works really fast. Once you have your foundational thick carbon layer happening in your run, it is totally fine to throw in whatever you like that is an organic material into your run. So I throw in my grass clippings, weeds from the garden, scraps from the kitchen, things the chickens don't feel like eating at the time. They like to change their minds a lot about what they like. So anything just goes into the run and it starts to break down and turn into compost. Let's talk about some of the reasons why a composting run might not actually be working as a composting run. Now, I have a great example of that right here between the two sides of my main chicken run. So here I am in the really super productive, awesome composting run, and on the other side of me is an area which I never intended to set up as a composting run, which is a good thing because it isn't working as one. Now, it is still really smell-free. It still works really well. The ground is covered, so that's all tick the boxes off, but it is not a composting run. And unless I do some bits and pieces to it, it never will be. So let's talk about those reasons. The main reason this side of the chicken run isn't working as a composting run is because all I have done is covered the ground with a layer of straw. And this particular straw is linseed straw or flax straw, and it forms quite a thick mat, which is great as mulch and it's great at covering the ground, but it's not very scratchable. And this is just sitting straight on the ground, straight onto the soil underneath, so there's not a nice thick carbon layer for all of that process to start working in. Another reason this isn't working as a composting run, even if I did add in the carbon, is that the chickens mainly use this area as a transiting zone between the main area of the run and the backyard. So whilst they poop here, they're not pooping a lot here. And the chicken poop is the fuel that drives the entire process. So there's not enough fuel to get the system kicked off and actually running. Effort and money you want to put into your composting chicken run really depends on your own priorities. The side of the run with the straw on that isn't actually composting still works absolutely fine as a great place for the chickens to live. It's not smelly, it's not muddy, it's not covered in flies, and it's not covered in poop. So it's still absolutely fine if all you're wanting is a clean, sweet-smelling chicken run. And if you're wanting a supercharged composting run, then you can put that little bit extra effort into getting the carbon layer in there and getting all of those things working, and it will pay you back in really good compost. One thing I didn't realize when I set my compost run up was how hungry for carbon it becomes once it's really working for you. Now that took about a year, and then all of a sudden I was like, oh, my whole run has turned into compost, and now I need to keep feeding it with materials. So I have a few strategies for keeping it running all the time. The first strategy that I like to use is letting plants grow along the edge of my run. So what they're doing is they are taking up the nutrients that are being produced in the compost and they're holding it, and I then just cut them down and throw them back into the run, so I'm not losing any important nutrients out of the run, and they're just holding it in place for me until I can get to it, basically. It's a really good way to do it, and all sorts of fun plants crop up there, and I just let them grow, and it's quite interesting to see what comes up. So that is one that I would highly recommend using. Another thing you can use to constantly feed your run is grass clippings, weeds from the garden, weeds from places that are not the garden. And what I like to use as really good to feed it is the old mulches that when I'm swapping them off the garden to put new ones in. So old straw, old wood chip, whatever I've been using on the garden to hold down the weeds, I take that and throw it into the composting run, and that's good because by the time it goes in there, it's pretty much just the carbons left in it. Another thing I always do is when I am cleaning out my chicken coop, removing the old bedding and putting in new bedding, or if I am changing the bedding in a nest box, I always put that out into the chicken run, which I did mention in the other video about this, but it's really important that all the bedding from your coop goes out into your run because it's your carbon and it's all that chicken poop as well from when your chickens have been sleeping out into the run to keep it going. Because my chicken composting run is so important to the whole system that I have happening here, I do top it up when needed with bought-in wood chip. I don't have to do that very often, but when I see that it's just not got enough to work with, I do have a truck come and bring a big load of wood chips so I can keep it going. Now you don't have to do that, it will still keep working perfectly fine without that top up, but if you want to harvest out lots of compost, that might be something you need to do. I'm really passionate about bringing regenerative agriculture principles to a home scale for people. If you have any questions about any of that, I would love to hear them and try and answer them for you. Thanks for watching, guys.